So here's a story that seems to me like it should be a much, much bigger deal. This is from the Washington Post. They say thousands of ICE detainees, that's Immigration and Customs Enforcement, claim they were forced into labor, a violation of anti-slavery laws. Whoa. So here's what they say. Tens of thousands of immigrants detained by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement were forced to work for $1 a day or for nothing at all, a violation of federal anti-slavery laws, a lawsuit claims. The lawsuit, filed in 2014 against one of the largest private prison companies in the country, reached class action status this week after a federal judge's ruling. That means the case could involve as many as 60,000 immigrants who have been detained. It's the first time a class action lawsuit accusing a private U.S. prison company of forced labor has been allowed to move forward. So a judge took a look at this and said, yeah, there appears to be merit to this, so this case moves forward. The heart of the dispute is the Denver Contract Detention Facility, which is a 1,500-bed center in Aurora, Colorado, and it's owned and operated by GEO Group. That's a notorious private prison company. We've spoken about them on the show before. I'm not sure if it was GEO or Corrections Corporation of America or whatever it was, but there were stories of like old, rotten, moldy, disgusting, rat-infested food being served to the inmates. And they didn't get rid of that batch of food and bring in more food because then it would have cost them money and they would have lost profit. So they fed this disgusting food to the inmates and they all got, diarrhea and were vomiting and were sick and all that stuff. This is what we're talking about with private prisons. This is what they do. They want more asses in those beds to make money, so they lobby the government to make more things illegal. For example, in California, the 3 strikes law, that came from lobbying from private prison companies. Hey, we want to lock people up for a longer amount of time. We want to keep them locked up because we make money if they're locked up, so let's make more things illegal. And let's make harsher punishments the reality. And then you try to cut costs when they're in the prison. So how do you cut costs? Well, one of the ways is to feed them that disgusting rotten food, because to bring in new food costs money, so fuck it. They're prisoners anyway, who cares? And then another way you cut costs is, instead of actually paying people to do work for stuff that you need done, force the prisoners to do it. And in this case, we're talking about, immigrants. So arrest them, detain them. They have no money, no power. They feel like they're completely at the whim of the system. So what do? I don't know. You wake them up in the morning. Hey, go clean the bathroom. Go clean this. Go do that. In the cases where they're being kind, they pay $1. In the cases where they're not, they just make them do it. 60,000 people part of this lawsuit. And the judge said, there's enough evidence where this is a real thing. Let's move it forward. Don't tell me that our system is not built off the exploitation of certain groups of people. It is. It is. Workers all across this country are exploited. When you have a minimum wage that is not a living wage, that is exploitation by its very nature. Because, and they've done studies on this, the productivity that's carried out by a minimum wage worker, they say is about $21 an hour. That's how productive they are. So that's how much work they're really putting in. But in many instances, they get paid $7.25. Well, there's a gap there now, isn't it? And where's the money going in that production? In the gap. It goes to the owner. That's where it goes. So that's exploitation. That's 100% what exploitation is. And now you have a case where, and by the way, this is also happening in prisons in general. So this is a ICE detention facility. It's kind of like a prison, you could say. But this happens with prison labor across the country, where they force prisoners to work, and then they underpay them or don't pay them at all. So now, listen, you could say, well, it's slightly different than slavery because, hey, they brought people over against their will and forced them to work, and they had no prospect of getting out. In the case of prison, at some point you can get out, depending on what your sentence is, but, hey, there was a process, and there were legal proceedings, and they adjudicated it, and then they found him guilty. I mean, still strikes me as a bizarre thing that perhaps shouldn't be allowed when you Even if somebody's guilty of a crime, okay, they're guilty of a crime, and you lock them up away from society for however long the proper amount of time is, but force them to do labor they don't want to do? I mean, that would be the definition of slavery. I mean, it's prison slavery, so I guess you could try to make a distinction, but you're still forcing somebody to do something they don't want to do. So, this strikes me as just... It's unbelievable. There's so many things that happened in 2018 that just make you do a double take, because you'd imagine we'd evolve past this by now. You know, medical bankruptcies is another one. It's like, oh, I fucking needed kidney surgery, and now I'm broke, and I got to sell my house. What? Yeah, we can't afford it. I'm medically bankrupt because of medical bill. I got sick through no fault of my own, and now I have no money and no prospects for a future. That's not a thing in other developed countries. It doesn't exist. That whole concept, they look at us like we're fucking Neanderthals. They're like, what are you doing in the U.S.? So you have $7 trillion to bomb a country that didn't attack you and kill civilians, but you don't have money to make sure that, you know, little Bobby doesn't run into some problem because of his gallbladder, and his parents don't have to sell his house because they're fucking his gallbladder. It's insanity. Thousands of ICE detainees forced into slavery. Unreal.